Chapter 1. Nova Scotia. September 2013. As I stepped onto the deck, Cindy asked between sips of her coffee.
Did you have a good run?
Noticing the look on my face, she asked,
What's wrong?
"We have to call the police," I replied. I sat down at my computer and began to look for the telephone number. As I searched the local sites, she said,
Just dial 911.
"They have 911 here?" I asked.
Of course, they're civilized.
I know she had a smug grin even though I couldn't see it. As I grabbed my cell phone and began to dial 911, Cindy questioned me.
What happened?
"I found a man dead on the shore."
Did you recognize him? When do you think he drowned?
She fired questions at me before I could even answer the first. Even if she had waited for answers, I had none to offer her. I had no clue why the body was there. Did the boat really drop it? Or had it washed ashore during the storm yesterday and last night? It was not unusual for me to find objects along the cove following these late summer storms. But a body? That sure was a first. I quickly explained my discovery to the receptionist who answered the phone. She did not seem as excited about the body as I was, but she said someone would be here shortly. "I don't think he drowned. I believe he was murdered." I filled Cindy in on the morning's events. I love to work early in the morning, with just the darkness saturated with the pre-dawn fog, waves crashing below, dew fresh on the grass, a cup of coffee, and my computer. This day had begun just like all the others. The final draft was going well. My mind was clear, and the early morning was so peaceful after last night's storm that I seemed almost one with the setting. Suddenly the silence was broken, but by what? I couldn't identify the sound, but I knew it was there. I looked at my monitor. It was not yet 5:30, and I knew my wife would not be up yet. I sat up straighter and listened. Nothing. I strained to hear anything unusual. My book's getting to me, I thought. No. There it was again. Just a slight sound that shouldn't be there. It was a deep bass, and I could feel it more than I could actually hear it. I got up and went out on the deck. I felt the pressure on my leg and looked at Chelsea. She was growling low in her throat, and the hair was standing along her neck as she pushed in closer to me. "What's going on, girl?" I scratched her ears as she continued to snarl. Then, between the breaks of the waves, I made out the sound of a motor. Although it was just past idling, I could tell by the deep sound it made that it was a powerful engine. I willed my eyes to see into the still blackened waters. Finally. There it is. Just a ghostly shadow, a shade darker than the surrounding sea. I watched as it slowly inched out of the cove. Why don't they have their running lights on? I wondered. I stood there quietly for some time, thinking. Just looking for a nice fishing spot or a good place to camp, I thought. However, I'm not sure that I believed that. The shadow of the boat that I saw did not really look like any of the local fishing vessels that worked out of these Canadian waters. After a while, as the dark began to give way to the first light of the day, I went back inside. It was time for my daily run on the beach, and as I put on my worn shoes, my mind continued to mull over the early morning visitors. I normally went for days on end without seeing another soul. The beach cottage here on the Nova Scotia shore was ideal for my work. Providing the quiet inspiration I needed for my writing, the cottage also offered me the satellite internet reception needed to let me keep in contact with the outside world. This is the only way that I could have hoped to continue teaching my online classes. We had been here for the past 2 months, and I was almost through with what I hoped would be my final draft. As I made my way down the winding steps to the sandy beach, Chelsea stayed close behind me. She enjoyed these early morning jaunts. She was almost 10 years old now, and although she was beginning to have some arthritis in her hips and back, the exercise was keeping her active. Her buff color was beginning to mix with gray. She had more problems with skin allergy than anything else. I paused at the bottom, looking around at the dunes and then out to the sea. Although there were clouds and dampness in the air from the thunderstorm, it was still among the most beautiful settings I had ever seen. During a vacation to the area a couple of years ago, my wife and I fell in love with the peaceful coast. Peggy's Cove and Lunenburg were postcard perfect. We vowed then to return here one day. When we got a chance to rent the cottage on the eastern end of Lunenburg County, we jumped at the opportunity. Although isolated in its own water inlet on Mahone Bay, it retained the idyllic setting of the coastal towns. I had a deadline for my new novel and needed someplace quiet to complete it, and I could not envision a more perfect setting. The owner was in Florida and would not return until the spring, so we could stay until then if we wanted to. However, our plans were to leave sometime before Thanksgiving. I started my run, slowly working through the stiffness that age and sitting at a computer brought to me. The only sounds were the continuous breaking of the waves and the soft padding of the cocker spaniel following me. After about a mile, I turned around and began my jog to the other end of the cove. I made this 5-mile jaunt at least 5 times a week and was in the best shape I had been in the last 20 years. The runs along the coast gave me time to reflect and freshen my mind. A little past the spot where I had begun my run, Chelsea began to snarl. I slowed and looked around. What I saw next completely shocked me. It was a body, and I knew immediately that it was dead. My mind flashed to the boat that had been there earlier. Was there a connection? As I thought this, I involuntarily shuddered. While Chelsea shrank from me, I bent over the body to confirm what I first thought. He was dead. Being careful not to disturb the body or the area surrounding it, I backed quickly away and made my way back to the house. We continued to discuss the finding while we waited for the authorities. After about 20 minutes, I decided to go on back to the beach. This time, I left Chelsea at the house with Cindy. Cindy could not easily negotiate the steps down to the shoreline. After having her back surgeries, she was forced to enjoy the setting from the deck overlooking the cove. Standing on the sand at the bottom of the steps, I debated whether or not to wait for the RCMP there or go on to where I had seen the body. My curiosity won out, and I moved off at a slow jog. I had told the man how to get to my house, and Cindy would direct him how to find me when he arrived. I had my iPhone, and I began to take pictures of the body and the surroundings. And then it struck me. The body was more than half covered with sand. If the crew on the boat was responsible for it, they must have tried to conceal the body and had to leave before they finished. I wonder what scared them away, I thought as I moved back down the beach to meet the authorities.
What's going on here?
The deep voice startled me, and I jumped even though I could see 2 men moving cautiously toward me.
Are you the person who reported the body?
Breathing a sigh of relief, I recognized the men approaching me. Although I did not personally know them, I had seen them when I visited the town. Holding out my hand, I said, "I'm Phil Kent, and yes, I am the one who called you."
I'm Sean Pfeiffer, and this is Jacques Roget. Let's look at that body.
As he grasped my hand, I sized him up. He was a big man, no, big was not the word. He was huge, about 6.5 feet tall, and must have weighed close to 300 pounds. His short hair was just beginning to show signs of gray. Dark eyes seemed to be looking right through me. The graying mustache and goatee provided an extra air of strength. Although he had a slight French accent, his English was good. Jacques, however, was another story. He was of normal size, and I could barely understand his broken English when he asked,
What are you doing on this beach, and how did you find the body?
He looked at me suspiciously as he spoke. I led them to the site and pointed at the man lying there. He is dead. I confirmed that when I found him. Other than checking for a pulse, I touched nothing. Sean knelt to verify the man's death.
You're right, dead.
Looking at Jacques, he said,
Better call this in. Get Lockie down here. Every once in a while, someone will fall from a boat and wash ashore.
As Jacques moved away from us and pulled his cell phone out, Pfeiffer looked at me and said,
I'm the assistant commissioner of the RCMP, or the commanding officer, CO. I'm called a lot of things. Tell me what you know.
My wife and I are leasing the cottage up there. We've been here about 2 months now. I get up early every morning, work for a while, and then come down to the beach to get in my daily run. Chelsea, my dog, runs with me, and she is the one that found the body. I explained the events to him, and then remembered the visitors to the cove as Jacques rejoined us. I don't know whether or not this has anything to do with the body, but there was a boat in here this morning. I was working on my computer about 5:30 and heard something. I went out to the deck and saw a boat. I barely could see its outline as it left the cove. It had no lights at all, not even running lights. I could tell it was a pretty big boat, probably about 30 feet. The motor sounded like one of those big, powerful engines, even though the boat was slipping away at just above an idle.
It looks like he has been here for several days, as much as he is covered.
Jacques said, pointing at the body. That's one of the strange things about it. I know it was not here yesterday morning or I would have spotted it. Maybe the people on the boat had started burying it in the sand and got scared away before they finished. I don't think the storm last night would have pushed it that far up the beach and covered it with that much sand. As we talked, we were interrupted by a siren.
That'll be Lockie,
said Sean.
He's the local medical examiner. You'll have to come down to the station and make a statement. Give us some time here and come to my office this afternoon. If I am not there, have Lucinda call me.
It was only about 5 minutes until a couple more men came shuffling across the sand. As one of them walked up to us, Pfeiffer said,
Lockie, this is Phil Kent. He is the one who found the body. Phil, this is Celep Locksmith. He is the local coroner. Everyone knows him as Lockie.
Lockie held out his hand and said,
I've heard about you. You're the writer who's staying in the Lecherman's house.
Glancing at the other man who was now bending over the body, he asked,
What have we got here?
I repeated my story to him as he looked closer at the corpse.
Do you recognize him?
He included both Pfeiffer and me in the question. I don't know him, I said. The CO echoed my reply.
I don't think he is from around here.
Pfeiffer said,
I've never seen him. What do you think killed him?
I don't see anything obvious. I'll have to get him to the morgue. Give me this afternoon to see if I can find anything.
Turning to the other man, he said,
Andre, get the gurney to the top of the steps and bring us a body bag.
While Andre went to get them, Lockie continued to inspect the body while he removed the sand that had half covered him.
Been here a while, it looks like. It has taken several days to pile this much sand on him.
That's a puzzle. Kent here says the body was not here yesterday morning. He was down here and would have seen it. We think that he was dropped off by some people in a boat this morning and they tried to bury him.
I was glad to see that Pfeiffer had bought into my theory that the early morning callers were involved in this. Pfeiffer explained to Lockie about the pre-dawn visit by the darkened boat.
I'll drop by the marina to see if there have been any strangers there. Surely someone around here would have noticed a power boat messing around these waters. Our fishermen keep a close watch on their fishing grounds. They talk to each other about any visitors.
He looked at me intently when he said that, and I knew what he meant. Andre approached us with the body bag. I watched as the ME and Andre moved to the dead man. As they carefully brushed sand off of the body, Lockie continued to inspect him, looking for anything that may give him a hint about the cause of death. Finally, they had the man completely free. Lockie scanned him over again, and then they carefully placed him into the body bag and zipped it up.
Can you give us a hand with this?
Asked Lockie. He looked at Pfeiffer as he spoke.
He'll be heavy getting up the hill.
I'll be back in a couple of minutes. Don't disturb the scene here.
I've watched enough crime series on television to know what he meant. I moved down the beach while I waited for Pfeiffer to return. I watched as they carried the man up the hill. Although they were at one end of the body, Lockie and Andre were straining to reach the top. Faifour, however, was by himself and looked as though he was transporting a rag doll. Officer Roger just followed them, offering no help. Once they reached the top, they placed the body on the gurney, and Lockie and Andre took over. Pfeiffer retrieved a roll of crime scene tape from his car and made his way back to me. Pfeiffer and his assistant walked around the area searching for clues. Then he stretched the tape off between some stakes he carried and spoke to me.
If you see that boat again, give me a ring. My mobile number's on this card. Call me any time, day or night. When you come down to the station today, we'll talk some more about this. I want to get down to the marina to check it out. I'll see you after a while.
He looked around once more and moved to the steps. I followed him, and he waited while I went to the house to get one of my cards. He got into the car with Roger, and I watched them pull quickly away and then went back into the house.
Well, what did you find out?
Asked Cindy. Really? Not much of anything. I told her about Pfeiffer and the medical examiner and what they had said. I have to go down to Pfeiffer's office this afternoon and make a statement. If you feel like going with me after that, we'll go eat at that seafood place we like.
Lobster sounds good. I'm ready for another one of them.
She smiled as she remembered how tasty they were.
What time do you need to be there?
He said any time this afternoon. I thought maybe about 3 o'clock would be good. That will give him time to go by the marina and talk to some folks about the boat I saw. Then we can probably make the lobster shack by 4 and beat the crowd. It's usually packed by 5. Remembering the body, I pulled my iPhone out of my windbreaker. Here are some pictures I took, handing her the phone. They had been burying him in the sand, but stopped for some reason.
We need to leave a few minutes early so we can drop Chelsea off at the vet's,
Cindy said. In all the excitement, I had forgotten that the vet needed to see Chelsea for her skin condition. The cocker crud was what our vet at home called it. Cindy scrolled through the pictures. After only a couple of minutes, she exclaimed,
You know what this looks like, don't you?
I bent over to see what she meant.
See how the body is buried. Look at what is not under the sand.
I stared at the picture. She scrolled to another. Finally, it hit me. Of course! I see it now. That should have been obvious to me.